Mayor Dean Brookie, and I'd like to welcome you to this April 2021 City Council meeting of Durango City Council. With that, I'd like to open the meeting and have a call to order and have a roll call, please. Ms. Phillips or Day?
I'll be doing the roll call tonight. Mayor.
All right, Ben, thank you so much.
Councilor Bettine.
Here, thanks.
Councilor Noseworthy.
Present.
Councilor Youssef.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter.
Present.
And Mayor Brookie.
Here, thanks so much. With that, we'd like to have our councilors identify any actual or perceived conflicts of interest for any of the items on the agenda this evening. Seeing none, we will move on to public participation. Item 4, this section of the agenda is set aside for public to provide comments or ask questions regarding items that are not scheduled for a hearing or public testimony, or that do not otherwise appear on this agenda. City Council will not respond to questions from the dais or virtually, as being the case this evening. Citizens should address their comments directly to the City Council. As this is a virtual meeting, the avenues for public participation have been adjusted, and you can join our meeting via Zoom, and our moderator, Ben, will allow you to join us. And alternatively, you can, if you're calling in by phone, you just simply use *9 and to use the raise hand function, and *6 will unmute you. And again, so there's our moderator is not Ben, but Mitchell this evening. Thanks for joining us, Mitchell. And do we have any public participation this evening?
Oh, yes, I do. Mayor, I do see a couple of people who have raised their hand. Before we get to that, I would like to make an announcement tonight that for those interested in, the members of the public interested in the unofficial election results, we will be posting those to our website, and that link address is durangogov.org/elections. And we'll try to keep that updated as much as possible tonight. So the first public attendee I see on the list is a phone number ending in 2752. Phone number ending in 2752. I have invited you to speak. Please press *6 to unmute yourself, and then you have 3 minutes. Phone number 2752. Please press *6 and introduce yourself for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mitchell. My name is Sweetie Marbury, and I am a city resident. Tonight, I'm going to be asking the city manager for transparency in announcing at the second meeting of City Council each month the sales tax report and also a lodger's tax report at the second meeting. This would inform the public who are watching television as opposed to going on to online and going through the finance department. I think it would give people the information that they need and would show transparency. And we frankly need to know how our general fund will be reacting during the next several months. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Marbury. Mitchell, do we have more participants this evening?
Nobody else has raised their hand. If we do have quite a few in the attendee list, if you are here to speak during public participation, now is the opportunity. I do see someone who has raised their hand. I'm going to invite Chris to speak. Chris, please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident. And you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Chris Hughes. I'm a local educator here in Durango, and I am a Durango resident in the Crestview area. I thought that I would be able to get on with my student who is actually the star of this project, but he's not able to get on, and the setup is a little different than other Zooms, so I wasn't sure. So I will give you the gist. We're actually here to celebrate amazing things that are happening in Durango, especially during these strange times. And we would like to invite City Council to a moon tree planting that is going to be happening at Rusa Park. And that'll be happening on April 22nd Thursday and to go along with Earth Day and Arbor Day, Arbor Week. We're working with the city arborist. We're working with some local schools to also plant some moon trees at those schools. I will have Alex actually send you an email in regards to this project. And so you can have some more background information. But the gist of it is, as an educator for almost 20 years here in Durango, I kick myself constantly for not taking advantage of educational opportunities, and to not celebrate Stuart Rusa and his amazing accomplishments for our young students is something like I said, I've kicked myself for. We have an Apollo 14 astronaut that was born here in Durango, Colorado. And to put that in perspective, there were 24 Americans in the NASA program that were able to either be on the moon or orbit the moon. And so he was one of 24. And we are questioning, why is he not celebrated more in Durango? Sure, we have a park, and sure, we have a street named after him. He also brought moon seeds, tree seeds into space to orbit around the moon, along with the Forest Service, and has since started a Moon Tree Foundation with his family. So we have Stuart Rusa's daughter, Rosemary Rusa, and the Moon Tree Foundation will be at Rusa Park on Thursday, April 22nd. We would love for anyone from student council, city council, you can tell I'm a teacher, to love for you to join, listen to Rosemary's inspirational story. We are also going to reach out because we want to shoot for the moon, no pun intended, and have a Stuart Rusa Day, because we think all of our little youngsters should celebrate him, all his accomplishments. And it's just such a neat story that we have coming right here from, our hometown of Durango, Colorado. And it shows these little guys that Stuart Rusa became an astronaut before there were even many pilots in the world. And he really wanted to become a pilot. And everyone kind of patted him on the back and said, yeah, good luck with that, buddy. And look what, he became. So I think it's such an inspirational story, and my time's almost up. So I will send you an email and an official invite, but I just wanted to put it out there so you could be a part of it.
Hey, Chris, what time is that?
Yeah, the time.
Great question. Tentatively speaking, with the weather, we're going to shoot for a 10 o'clock. We thought that would be a good time, just warming up, not too hot. But obviously, with the weather, we'll have to, we're going to make it a small event. So we thought city council, some important folks in Durango. We're not having any students at the Rosemary or at the Rusa Park ceremony. We are then going to go to schools. So we have Durango Montessori, Mountain Middle School, Needham Elementary, and St. Columba that have offered that want to join, and they will have tree plantings there as well. So no kids will be at this event, just all adults. And so yeah, it won't be as fun without the kids, but hopefully 10 o'clock, that should be the plan.
Thank you.
Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate it. And yeah, I remember reading a proclamation, which we might choreograph as well for that occasion later in the month. A few years ago, I remember reading the proclamation for Mr. Rusa, and yeah, just a shout out for your school. And what school are you affiliated with, and your student that's organizing this? Chris, are you there?
Yep, sorry, I had to unmute. Yeah, I'm actually, I do educational consulting with local families around Durango. So I've been working with a student one-on-one, and actually we were studying the parks of Durango because he's a very active young boy, and I thought, how can I get to know him a little bit better? And I'll make it quick, but the funny part of the story is we did all this research. Fastbinders is fascinating, Snyder's fascinating, and we got to Rusa, and he liked the astronaut piece, but his family is from Switzerland, and he found out that the Transit Museum in Switzerland has a moon tree, and he goes, why the heck isn't there one in Durango? Yeah. And I said, good question. What should we do about it? And it was the first time I really saw this spark with him, and he took it and ran with it. And, he's had phone conversations with NASA, the Forest Service, the Rusa family. We have a really tight relationship with them at this point, because this project's been going on for almost 2 years now. So his goal is to have the most moon trees planted in a city in Durango. And then it could eventually, it'll eventually be a great thing to come visit, scavenger hunt from tree to tree, all these different things that we can do. He's definitely shooting for it. So the only thing we'd be second to is the Kennedy Space Center, because they have a whole moon tree like garden of sorts.
Excellent, excellent. Well, thanks for your involvement and thanks for bringing this to us.
Absolutely, thanks.
Mhm. With that, Mitchell, do we have more participants that you can invite into our meeting today?
Mayor, we do have quite a few in the attendee list, but no one else has raised their hand. If you are here to speak during public participation, please use the raise hand function now, and it is your opportunity.
While we're waiting for that, I might just acknowledge a written email from Stan and Carolyn Mason in opposition to the homeless camp at the Elks up near Greenmont Cemetery. So I won't read the whole thing, but I want to acknowledge that receipt of that document.
Mayor, nobody else has raised their hand.
All right. With that, I'd like to close public participation and move on to agenda item 5, which is proclamations and presentations. We have 3 this evening, starting with 5.1, National Library Week proclamation. So I will read this and hope that we have a recipient to talk about National Library Week after I'm finished. So National Library Week, whereas the American Library Association's theme for National Library Week 2021 is Welcome to Your Library, promoting the idea that libraries extend far beyond the walls of their building and that everyone is welcome to use their services. And whereas the Durango Public Library enriches the community by providing an environment where information abounds, ideas flow, and imagination thrives. And whereas the Durango Public Library provides a welcoming place for all people to gather, learn, and discover. And whereas the library provides a dynamic collection in multiple formats to support learning and recreation. And whereas the library employees are engaged in their work, are dedicated to serving the community, and are recognized for their commitment on Tuesday, April 6th for National Library Workers' Day. And whereas during the last year, the library offered expanded digital collections and curbside pickup of materials to the community. And whereas the Durango Public Library recently reopened to the public after this challenging pandemic year with multiple safety precautions in place to protect the staff and customers. And whereas we celebrate all that Durango Public Library offers to the community and the critical role the library will play in the recovery process for our citizens. Now, therefore, I, Dean Berkey, Mayor of Durango, Colorado, do hereby proclaim April 4th through the 10th, 2021 as National Library Week. And with that, I believe we have Sandy Irwin, the library director, to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor Berkey and councilors, for recognizing National Library Week. The library team is working hard to provide services, also while remaining safe. We reopened last month. We had 8,300 visitors during the month of March. Our community is continually expressing how grateful they are for library services, how much they miss being able to access our resources during the pandemic, and how many of them are appreciating what they had lost during that time, and the library is one of those resources. I would like to also take this moment to thank Mayor Berkey and Councilor Bettine for your time on council. I appreciate all of your support, and Councilor Youssef, thank you for your last 4 years as well. And we will see if there's another 4 years of gratitude coming your way. And to all of you, thank you for your support of the library. And I wish you all nothing but the best. And to our community, please stop in the library. We are happy to serve you. That's why we're here, to give you the best resources that we can. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandy. And I have to say, as I end my 8-year career on city council, the board I'm going to miss sincerely is going to be the library advisory board. Having served on that for the past couple of years, it's been a real honor. And unfortunately, haven't been able to meet over this past year, except to see your face, everybody's face on screen. So, but thanks so much, and appreciate it. It's great to have National Library Week recognized. So thanks again. With that, we'll move on to agenda item 5.2, which is also a proclamation for the National 911 Telecommunicator Week proclamation. So whereas emergencies can occur at any time that require police, fire, or emergency medical services. And whereas when an emergency occurs, the prompt response of police officers, firefighters, and paramedics is critical to the protection of life and the preservation of property. And whereas the safety of our police officers, firefighters, and community members is dependent upon the quality and accuracy of information obtained from the community members who telephone the Durango La Plata Emergency Communications Center. And whereas public safety telecommunications are the initial first responders in our community and are the most critical contact our community members have with emergency services. And whereas public safety telecommunicators are the single vital link for our police officers, our firefighters, paramedics, by monitoring their activities by radio, providing them information and ensuring their safety. And whereas public safety telecommunicators of the Durango La Plata Emergency Communications Center have contributed substantially to the apprehension of criminals, suppression of fires, and treatment of patients. And whereas each 911 public safety telecommunicator has exhibited compassion, understanding, and professionalism during the performance of their job during the past year. Now, therefore, I, Dean Brookie, Mayor of the City of Durango, Colorado, do hereby proclaim April 11th through the 17th, 2021 as National 911 Telecommunicator Week, to coincide with the National 911 Educational Month. And I call upon all government officials, parents, teachers, school administrators, caregivers, business leaders, nonprofit organizations, and the people of the United States to observe this month with training, events, and activities to educate the public on 911 and its services. Signed, Dean Brookie, Mayor of Durango, Colorado. And I believe we have a representative of the 911 Communication Center to accept this proclamation.
Yes, sir, Mayor and Council. If I could go ahead and introduce Zita Fail. She is our interim director of 911 communications. When Suzanne retired in January, we needed somebody to fill in. So she was a great fill in. She's done a lot of work out there at 911, really getting us online with a lot of great things going forward and kind of giving us a real good shot in the arm with morale out there. So Zita, thank you so much for what you've done. And we are looking to kind of complete the 911 communications director search here probably in the next 6 weeks. We're hoping to have somebody on board. But I know Zita has definitely been a true asset here, but I am sure that she is kind of looking forward to getting to go back home after spending several months away from home. But Zita, thank you so much. And I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you, Jose. I've enjoyed my time here in Durango. You have a beautiful city. Everyone has been very welcoming, and I've really, really enjoyed working with every individual that's in this organization. Thank you, Mayor Brookie and Council, for designating next week as National 911 Telecommunicator Week. We appreciate the recognition for such a difficult job. It's, there's a trend nationally to recognize 911 telecommunicators as first responders, and I applaud the City of Durango and La Plata County for being ahead of the curve. It's a job that's been long misunderstood, but I think we're moving in the right direction. On a daily basis, they're the lifeline for the law enforcement, fire, and EMS responders, and they take a roller coaster of calls and all the emotions that go along with that on a constant basis. They're our first contact for everyone in your community that's in need. And next week, we're going to celebrate their professionalism and the training that goes into all of this. But we just really appreciate the recognition and thank you for your support.
You're welcome. Thanks so much, and appreciate you helping us out in our time of need as well. So thanks
Absolutely.
again. You bet. You bet. So the next item on our agenda is 5.3, the 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. City Manager, can you introduce this guest speaker?
Yes, Mayor and Council, it'd be my pleasure to introduce Cynthia Sneed, our Finance Director. Today is a big day for us. And one of the biggest challenges was getting caught up to speed and kind of moving forward with some of the areas that still needed to be addressed. And so we have finished our 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, and I will hand it over to Cynthia Sneed to introduce our presenters.
Thank you, Jose. Good evening, Mayor and councilors. I am extremely pleased tonight to share with you that we've issued the long overdue 2019 Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. And for those of you who may not be real familiar with that report, it is the annual financial statements, but plus more, which is what makes it comprehensive. It includes things like statistical information and some management analysis and some other items as well. So I would like to express my gratitude to the finance department, the staff that really stepped up in a really big way during this very difficult and extraordinary circumstances in order to accomplish this major task of putting out this report. So without further ado, I'm pleased to reintroduce to you the audit partners from the audit firm of Eide Bailly, who did the audit for the CAFR, Kim Higgins and Paul Kane. And they are here to present the results of the audit and the financial statements.
Good evening. I'm Kim Higgins, one of your engagement partners for the city of Durango. Thanks, Cynthia, for the introduction. And we're happy to be here tonight to present the 2019 Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. Paul and I understand we have somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes to present the final results of that audit and the opinions tonight. We have met with council on several occasions back in 2020 and in 2021, since we've been hired in January of 2020. You may recall, several of you, that Paul, myself, and Jeff Birch, the senior audit manager in our office, were in your offices in February of 2020, performing planning for the 2019 audit right before the pandemic hit. I interviewed several of you on council during that time. We finished the remainder of the 2019 financial statement and federal compliance audit remotely, including the airport audit, and we're presenting the city's audit reports tonight a little over a year later. Our first, we do have a PowerPoint presentation, which you will see. Hopefully you have also the financial statements with you. I think Paul is sharing the screen, and our agenda really to get through this quickly at a very high level is to cover the financial statement audit on our agenda, the single audit reporting. Paul, are you controlling this?
I am. Okay. Did that work?
Okay.
Good.
The financial statement audit, which I will cover at a very high level, the single audit reporting package, which Paul will cover, and then our final required communication, which is our letter to governance, will end the presentation. So the first thing that I would like to cover with you is on page 16 of your financial packet, if you have your financial statements in front of you, and it is the independent auditor's report. This is what you pay us for. And so I want to go through it in detail. It is on pages 16 through 18 of the financial statement packet. It is an unmodified opinion. It says the independent auditor's report at the top. It is the best that you can get. Any other CPA firm auditing the same set of numbers that we were given should give you the same opinion. You may be asking yourselves, how can that be with what the city's been through in 2019? And that's really why we're here today. And it took us until today to deliver this report, because we had to make sure as your auditors that the investigations were complete, the information was available and complete for all the accounts that we audited, which we believe has occurred, and why we can say that the financial statements are fairly presented in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. So we had to obtain enough audit evidence to satisfy ourselves that your financial statements were presented fairly, without material misstatements from fraud or error. So the first paragraph on the independent auditor's report, which I'm going to cover with you, indicates what was audited. And it simply says that we've audited the financial statements for the city as of and for the year ended December 31, 2019, as well as the notes to the financial statements, which we call the basic financial statements, and they're listed in your table of contents. The second paragraph talks about management's responsibility. We actually look at management's responsibilities as and it's exclaimed in the opinion as you are responsible as management for the preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in accordance with GAAP. You're also responsible for the design, implementation, and maintenance of internal control that gets you to the preparation of the financial statements being free from material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error. The next three paragraphs on page 1 of the opinion, or page 16 as it is, are paragraphs 3 through 5, and it explains the auditor's responsibility. That first paragraph under auditor's responsibility says that we're responsible for expressing opinions on the financial statements based on our audit in accordance with our professional standards, which are generally accepted auditing standards, as well as generally accepted government auditing standards. Those standards require us to plan and perform the audit to obtain reasonable assurance that the financial statements are free from material misstatement. The next paragraph under auditor's responsibility talks about what an audit involves, which is we are required to perform procedures to obtain audit evidence about amounts and disclosures. So this paragraph indicates that we audit amounts and disclosures, and it depends on our judgment to include an assessment of risk of material misstatement to the financial statements. That's how we determine what our processes and procedures are. And we need to look at those financial statements and the risk of material misstatement, whether due to fraud or error as well. We consider internal controls, but we do not audit or issue an opinion on internal controls. We obviously have to look at internal controls to be able to get to the amounts and the disclosures that you have placed in the financial statements, but we don't issue an opinion on those. We issue an opinion on amounts and disclosures. We also look at, as we're going through the audit process, we look at the accounting policies, and that's in the footnotes as well, the reasonableness of any significant estimates that you may have made in the financial statement presentation, and the overall financial statement presentation. So that's really what the audit involves. In the last paragraph underneath, or sentence underneath auditor's responsibility, indicates that we believe that the audit evidence that we have obtained is sufficient and appropriate to provide a basis for our audit opinion. The second page of the audit opinion at the top is the opinion, and it says that the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. There is a paragraph underneath the opinion paragraph, which is the restatement paragraph, which is addressed in note 4E of your financial statements. It talks about, that restatement paragraph talks about the fact that there were errors in 2018 that were corrected in these financial statements for sales tax revenues that should have been recorded in 2018, and items that were capitalized that should have been expensed in prior years. Those errors were corrected, and beginning balances were correct in these financial statements. Therefore, this paragraph says our opinion didn't change because those errors were corrected. The next paragraph has to do with other matters. The opinion needs to cover, or the opinion document needs to cover, everything that's in these financial statements. So there's also required supplementary information, which we talk about is unaudited. And part of that required supplementary information, management's discussion and analysis. There's pension liability information and budget to actual schedules. The other information, other supplementary information that follows RSI, or the required supplementary information, has been put through the audit paces, and it is presented in relation to the financial statements as a whole. It's also accurate, and we say that it is an unmodified opinion in relation to the financial statements as a whole, and it's fairly presented as well. The third page of the opinion continues the other matters, and it simply is the information at the front and at the very back, the introductory information and the statistical information. It's also not audited. And then there is the final paragraph, which is an other reporting required by generally accepted government auditing standards, and Paul will cover that as part of the single audit reporting package. So because this is a higher level, I'd like to cover the Mdna, and the reason for that is because the Mdna is the only place that you can see comparative information between 2018 and 2019 in these financial statements. So the Mdna matches the actual audited financial statements, but the Mdna again gives that information. So the financial highlights, if you're looking at the audit report, you can see on page 19, you can see the Mdna, and the bulleted points are under financial highlights, talks about the city's assets exceed the city's liabilities by over $333 million. That's really the equity of the city in total at a full accrual basis. Then it talks about the fund, the general fund, which you are very interested in, and talks about the unassigned and assigned fund balances for the general fund being over $8.9 million, or 23% of general fund expenditures. And so that's a very positive financial piece of information as well. An overall full accrual net position, or the net income at the end of 2019, increased by $16.4 million from the restated 2018 balances, and that increase is nearly $2 million over what happened in 2018. Fund balance of the governmental funds is increased, or the net income of the governmental funds increased by $4 million from 18.7 million to 22.8 million, and that is the governmental funds of the city. So an increase up to 22%. So what this tells you, if you're looking at the financial statements or you're looking at the actual next page of this PowerPoint presentation, you can see here the governmental activities, the business type activities, and the total of the numbers that we just covered. And you can see that there on the far right-hand side, the total, that 333 million, that second column in, compared to the 2018's $317 million. That is the difference in 2018 to 2019. It really shows a very positive financial position of the city in 2019, regardless of what's happened to you over the last many years that we were talking about in the beginning. So very positive financial information for 2019 that you can see here. And you can see the full accrual information that we talked about earlier. The next slide has to do with the net position. And if you were to look at actually page 22 of the Mdna, which is the next slide, you can see that the net position and the net income, you can see I think it's the fourth number from the bottom. You can see that actually it's the third number from the bottom. You can see that the net position for 2019 was over $16.4 million, which we talked about. That's the second column in from the right. You can see that the business type activities net position, or change in net position, or net income, if you will, is over $7 million. And you can see that the governmental activities net income for 2019 was over $9 million. And in all of those cases, you can see that they improved over 2018. Looking at the next slide, the significant note disclosures that I would like to cover with you are the significant accounting policies, which are in note 1. You can look at, and I can go through those with you if you'd like, deposits and investments, which most of the city councils want to know how you're doing with cash. That's in note 3A. That is on page 48 of your financial packet if you want to look at the detailed footnote. Capital assets is in note 3D, and that is on page 52 of your financial statement packet. Long-term debt is on page 60. The restatement that we talked about is on page 75, which we talked about. It's also in the opinion. And then the contingency footnote is the last footnote on page 76 in 4G, which talks about the actual fraud. And just to go through that, 4G is on page 76, like I said. It just talks about the various suits and claims that are pending for the city. The final outcome is not material to the financial statements, which is why the opinion is clean. Talks about the district court for La Plata County has ordered an individual to pay restitution to the city of over $710,000. Your internal controls have improved as a result of that, and the total potential recovery and restitution of $250,000. So that's in the footnote to explain what's happened in 2019. And from a standpoint of what the 2019 financial statements look like, again, very positive financial statements, and the fact that we've gone through several different regimes at the city with finance directors and contract employees. I will say that everyone has been excellent to deal with, and including city council. We really appreciate all of the information you provided, the transparency you provided, the information. allowing us to be able to do what we need to do and get to this point to be able to deliver that. So if there are any questions about the financial statements, what we did through the audit process, I'm happy to try to address those now before I turn it over to Paul to talk about the actual compliance single audit.
Any questions from council for Ms. Higgins? Hearing none, let's, if you're on a roll, let's, we'll have time at the very end to,
Okay.
if anybody thinks of anything for you. Thanks, Kim.
Okay, thanks, Kim. I'm going to go over the single audit report, and what it's called, if you're looking at the packet, is the Federal Awards Reports in accordance with uniform guidance. So this report is essentially a couple different reports, opinions, the results of our single audit, and it's kind of the management letter. It has our financial statement findings. It would have our single audit findings and things like that. So it's a 16-page document. In the past, this has been included in the back of your comprehensive annual financial report. Just the size of this and the information included. The city wanted to report this separately as its own document this year. So this is not within your financial statement, but it is its own document that we issued, again, called the Federal Awards Report in accordance with uniform guidance. Going through this, the first page is the report on financial statement internal controls. And it's got a lot longer title than that, but that's, in summary, it's a report on the controls. It's not an opinion. It basically just says we're required to consider controls for planning and performing our audit. We don't test those controls, and we don't express an opinion on the controls, but we are required to communicate any deficiencies that we identified during our audit. And so this year we had 3 material weaknesses in internal controls, all related to the financial statement audit. And we'll go through those in a minute, but that's 2019 001, 002, and 003. We're required to number them that way. Going on to page 3, this is the uniform guidance report. So this is essentially our report over our single audit. The first paragraph basically states that we audited the city's compliance with OMB compliance supplement. Tells us what we need to do. You can find the programs that we identified as major within your summary of auditor results, which is on page 8. Go through that in a minute as well. The only program that was major this year was your airport improvement program. The next 2 paragraphs within this report basically say that they describe management's responsibilities and our responsibilities, and that we believe that our audit gives us a reasonable basis for our unmodified opinion. So, spoiler, onto our opinion, we do have an unmodified clean opinion over the airport improvement program. It basically says the city did comply with all the compliance requirements that could have a direct and material effect on the major programs, on the airport. So all compliance requirements were complied with. So after that opinion, we have another report. It's a couple of page long report. It goes over internal controls over compliance, and it basically says we considered controls over compliance as part of doing our work, and we had no instances of deficiencies over controls over compliance. We also had no compliance deficiencies as well, thus the unmodified opinion. So it was a really good single audit. No issues noted there at all within that program. So the next page is your CFA. This is your schedule of expenditures of federal awards, is what CFA stands for. And this is basically a summary of all your annual federal expenditures. And if you go through that, I just broke down your total expenditures this year. All the federal dollars the city spent in 2019 was $10.5 million. Of that $10.5 million, $8.6 million was within this airport improvement program. Runways, taxiways, things like that, spent improving the airport. In the prior year, 2018, $10 million. So basically the same amount of expenditures year over year. But in 2018, $5 million of it came from the clean water grant program for the sewer project you guys did. And only 2.8 million was related to the airport improvement program. So a lot of fluctuation there with your spending. Remaining programs besides airport and the sewer project were really consistent year over year. the summary of auditor's results. So this is page 8 of the single audit report. It's probably pretty small here on my slide. So if you're looking at the report, this is a document that just summarizes our results and identifies which programs we audited. We have to audit. We make a differentiation between type A and type B programs per uniform guidance. The scope is $750,000. So your airport program was over the $750,000. It was a type A program, and you were not a low risk auditee. And so we had to cover 40% of your expenditures within our single audit. And as a result, the airport, like I said, was 8 million out of 10 million. So we really covered about 80% of your expenditures this year with the testing we did. Again, this also summarizes the results in unmodified opinion. We did have material weaknesses over internal controls of our financial reporting, but there were no internal control issues related to the federal awards. So it kind of breaks down the financial statements from the federal awards. No issues over the awards, unmodified opinion. And that's essentially a summary of auditor's results. And so then we'll break down the findings quickly for you, because I know we're running out of time. There's 3 of them. The first one is related to the restatements that Kim discussed already. There were restatements and related to 2018 financial statements that we posted this year, or the city posted this year. She talked about those. I won't go into details. If you have questions at the end, we can go over it further. But essentially, material restatements will result in a material weakness just because a control had to break down somewhere that resulted in this restatement having to occur. And so we kind of go through that within this finding and provide some recommendations. The second finding, I'll go over a little more detail. So in understanding the fraud that occurred, obviously controls broke down in ways that allowed this to occur. And so through the audit, through conversations that we had, we determined that these issues we pointed out within this finding contributed to allowing this to happen. We pulled out lack of segregation of duties between budgeting, purchasing, just the overall cash disbursement process, lack of written policies and procedures detailing financial processes of the city overall. So there really isn't clear written policies and procedures over these processes. And the processes that are there, there can be some better segregation of duties, both within the purchasing and the budgeting and the disbursement processes. So back to budget, there really is an overall lack of segregation of duties within the budget process that we identified. And then going through that, we did identify other budget deficiencies, and we just threw those into this finding as well, related to reappropriation, related to multi-year projects, and not reconciling the fund balances per the budget to actual fund balances within the financial statements. And then we also identified that there was no whistleblower policy or fraud hotline in place. I think it does summarize essentially the big picture of the issues. And if you have questions on this or kind of want to talk about it more, again, we can talk about that when we're done here. And the last finding was 2019-003. And this had to do with completeness of the CFA, so the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards. What we audited from was actually $2.5 million less than where this ended up just a few days before issuance, when the 2020 CFA was being put together. Another $2 million was identified related to 2019 expenditures. And so really this drives our single audit, and the CFA being accurate up front is really important because it drives, like I said, how much we have to test and what those programs are. And if it's not complete, we may end up having to test more. And it could have led to another program, but the additional expenditures that were missed were within the airport program. So as a result, we were able to test those in addition to what we had already tested, and not have to test anything additional as a result of this being incomplete. Just the findings just really related to improving controls over the prep of that CFA and making sure it's being reconciled to the GL at the time it's being prepared, to ensure like all expenditures are caught and added to the CFA at the time of preparation. And so that's the third finding. And that's it for the single audit report. Kim, do you want to go through the 260 or do you want me to?
You're on a roll, so go for it.
Okay, perfect. I think Cynthia gave you guys this letter as well. It's required communication that we send at the end of every audit. It's really a tailored letter, really a templated letter that we tailor to each audit, and it goes through these key bullets. It's a 3-page letter that broke down here into like 5 bullets for you. Basically says that we complied with the professional standards, including all ethical requirements while performing our audits. The city did not adopt any new accounting policies during 2019. The financial statements do include sensitive disclosures because of their importance to the users of the financial statements. And Kim did go through those when she was talking earlier. If there's corrected misstatements that we identify during our audit, those get communicated within this letter. There were no corrected misstatements. However, there was one uncorrected misstatement. It was not material. Management decided to pass on reporting it, and that's identified within this letter. And lastly, we're happy that there were no disagreements or significant difficulties with management that were encountered during the audit. So the key bullets within this letter. And lastly, we just put together a slide of upcoming GASB implementations. The Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB, drives how you have to report things, how you have to account for things, and they like to make changes. So there is a lot of new GASBs coming down the line, as you can see. This slide highlights, there's more even that are on this that are not on this slide, but there's a lot coming down the line. So the accounting department, finance department's going to be super busy in the next couple of years. Next year's fiduciary activities is a big one. Well, this year, the year we're in. And then leases are right around the corner, which is going to be huge for everybody. But there's a lot of changes just for you to be aware of that will be keeping everyone busy. And that is all we had in our 15 minutes, 20 minutes. So what questions do you guys have for us?
Thank you, Paul and Kim, very much. And yeah, it's been enjoyable working with you. I might say the city has undertaken a special study to evaluate the policies and procedures and make corrections necessary relative to the embezzlement that occurred over the past years. And so we have, as a result of this recommendation, instituted those procedures. And any other questions from council?
I don't have any questions, but I want to say how reassured I feel at this point with an audit like this, of the quality and the caliber of this audit, and that going forward, that support being given to the finance department to do these things the way they're supposed to be done and in a timely manner. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how this year works and what we can come up with for getting good, timely, transparent information out there for not just the council and the staff, but also for our community. I did notice, and I wanted to, I know Councilor Noseworthy had mentioned this several times over the past year, and I just wanted to make sure that we note the whistleblower policy recommendation, that we actually get one in place. So I don't know if Dirk is here on the call or not, but I just want to kind of put that in Dirk's ear and say, hey, let's see what we can do about that. So thank you very much, everyone.
Absolutely.
I will second the need for a whistleblower policy, and I know we've looked at it, and I know that there's some policies on the GFOA, but I would welcome if Bailey has any standard boilerplate for whistleblower policies. I'd welcome receiving that. I'd like to hear from Cynthia, if we may, just some of the things that you're doing to address the separation of duties and to address the things that were considered material and what was enabled the fraud to take place. What are you doing to address that?
Certainly, Councilor Noseworthy. So we have taken a look at this, the distribution of the workload distribution, and making sure that we are separating the transactions accordingly. One thing that has been a little bit tricky with that is this shortage of staff. However, we are actively recruiting and ready to hire a couple new people, which will make a huge difference for us to be able to separate out who's doing what, and having a separate set of eyes on many of the transactions that are going through, as well as as the financial statements are being prepared, we're going to have this extra layer of review built in so that we will identify when we have overlooked something or so I have responded with, I put together what's called a corrective action plan to address each of those 3 material weaknesses that were identified for that very same type of process, additional review, separation of duties. So definitely taking a look at that and ramping up for the new pronouncements that are coming down the line so that in future financial statements will be done more timely and more accurately the first time out.
Well, thank you, Cynthia. I know your plate has been full and you've been here a short time, and I appreciate all the work you've done in this short period to bring those procedures into place and have the personnel. And then also just a thanks to Bailey to reiterate or to echo Councillor Baxter's comment. It gives us a great deal of confidence in being aware of how thorough you went through this audit and these reports. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We do appreciate your business. Thank you.
Well, thanks. And I might say that I'll ask this question of Jose if the full audit is posted on our website for the public to view.
Is that Cynthia?
Yes, it is out on the website and available for public consumption.
Great. And lastly, the recommendations for those policies and procedures, I think would be full implementation of the recommendations from the group that we had evaluate the circumstances around the embezzlement, as well as make long-term recommendations for policy changes for the city of Durango. So with that, I'd like to move on to our next agenda item, which is a review of the consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to allow the city council by a single motion to approve matters that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests an item to be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. Items removed from the consent agenda will be considered under agenda item 8. So with that, may we have a reading of the consent agenda?
Yes, sir. Items 6.1 through 6.3 are approval of minutes. Item 6.1 is for the City Council regular meeting on March 2nd, 2021. Item 6.2 is for the study session on March 9th. 6.3 is for the study session on March 23rd, 2021. Items 6.4 through 6.7 are discussion and possible action items. 6.4 concerns a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the general fund for the purchase of game time supplies. Item 6.5 concerns a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation of CRRSAA grant funding to the Airport Enterprise Fund for concessionaire relief. 6.6 concerns a resolution accepting the Shozer annexation petition and setting a public hearing for the annexation and initial zoning, which is for May 18th, 2021. 6.7 concerns a resolution authorizing an additional appropriation to the Capital Projects Fund in support of the, I believe, County Road 250, 251 Engineering Services Partnership Project. Items 6.8 through 6.10 are requests for public hearings. 6.8 is to consider an ordinance authorizing a lease with Agile Space Industries, Inc. at the airport. That's scheduled for April 20th, 2021. 6.9 would be to consider an ordinance authorizing a lease with Keith and Mary Fassbender at the airport. That's for April 20th. 6.10 is for the public hearing for the Mountain Trace 2 and Timber Trails Preliminary Development Plan, scheduled for April 20th, 2021. And then lastly, item 6.11 is final approval of ordinance O 2021-6, amending chapter 27 of the Code of Ordinances, Land Use and Development Code. by the amendment and addition of definitions and portions of sections and tables in Article 4-5 governing parking and loading, and in Section 3-5-1-4 governing trash, recycling, and compost containers and declaring an effective date.
Thank you, Mr. Florine. And with that, I'll ask council if there's any items that you would like to have removed from the consent agenda. If not, I have one, which is 6.8, a request for public hearing to consider an ordinance authorizing the lease of an Agile Space Industries. And that's the only one I'd like to remove. Any others? All right, if not, I'd like to move on to item 7, which is approval of the consent agenda, less item 6.8.
I would make a motion that we approve the consent agenda without item 6.8.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please, Ben?
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
and Mayor Bricky.
Yes. I just want to turn it over to Tony Vicari, our airport director, who requested that this item be deleted primarily because it's not ready for prime time. And Tony, go ahead and explain what's happening with that lease.
Certainly. Good evening, Mayor and City Council. Quite simply, agenda item 6.8 was requested for removal by the prospective lessee under the proposed lease, simply to provide for additional review time on their end before this item is taken for a public hearing. I anticipate that this will end up on a future City Council agenda, quite likely in the next 2 council meetings.
Great, Tony. So I think this one we should just, rather than drop it from the agenda, just continue it. In which case, I don't believe it takes, there's any formal action required to bring this item, re-agendize this item. Dirk, I'll ask you if there's any formal action that we need to take this evening.
I don't think so, Mr. Mayor. I believe that we'll probably just re-agendize it when the item is ready for presentation to council.
Excellent. Thanks. Thanks so much. Well, with that, thank you, Tony. And we'll move on to, that was removed consent agenda item. So agenda item 9 is the preliminary election report. And I don't know if we have any, if it's appropriate timing or if they're done counting or even started counting, but if we have anything to report, we'd love to hear it. Ben?
I can comment on that. We actually don't have any unofficial results yet. The polls just wrapped up a half hour ago, but I believe that information is going to be coming to us soon. I know we have a kind of final unofficial election results segment at the end of the agenda, so we could circle back to it then. Or if that information comes into me, I can raise my hand and share that with the group in the meantime.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ben. And please do just keep us appraised, and we'll interrupt as we get into it here. Next item on the agenda is public hearings. And we have item 10.1, legislative and policy related hearings. We have a public hearing to consider an ordinance to grant the city manager authority to allow short-term use of city-owned condos to support human resources and staffing efforts. And I think we'll have a staff report, please.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'll ask, excuse me, Aaron and Jared if they're there to join us in this presentation as well. Definitely was a group effort in putting some of these items together. Again, we do own 2 condos at the Silver Peak Condominium Homes at 1100 Gigline Gulch Road. And what we're looking to do is, as per ordinance, needing an ability to lease that real property or rent out that real property. So we're looking at allowing the city manager to have short-term use, myself, for areas that come up to where we have employees that are coming into the city that may need some transitional housing before they get settled into Durango. So we are looking for that ability to do so. There was some questions that were asked at the meeting, the previous meeting, that had to do with the condos. So I'll kind of hit some of the overview for each one. And if there's any more specific questions, be happy to answer it. We have the first condo, which is number 142. That was approved by action on August 19th, 2008. It was purchased for $205,920. And we purchased that via a loan from First National Bank for a 20-year fixed rate of 4.5%. Using general fund receipts for payment. We put $41,000 down, and we do have a monthly mortgage of $1,048.01 that we have been paying off, that was scheduled to pay off in 2028. Part of that also was to look at kind of what is the total cost with the condos in regards to revenue coming in and expenditures. This one, it does have a net of about $12,000 during that period of rental revenue. So it looks like we had about a total cost of negative $208,889. Obviously, as we rent these out, they have not been rented out at 100%. The usage for this first condo, 142, is about 62.4% usage. There was a different slew of employees that looked like they have been using it, and then last one being myself. And we looked at the La Plata County assessor, and that cost is $224,930 is what that condo is valued at today. Of course, that's just the assessor. We don't know what that value would be if we placed it on the real estate market. With that, is it appropriate for me, Mayor, to open up for questions on this one, or should I just go through the presentation and then open the public hearing?
I think just go ahead and talk about the whole picture, and then we can have counselors ask questions as well as the public in a public forum.
Sounds good. Okay. And so the second condo is condo number 242. This was purchased on June 6th, 2017. It was purchased for $240,693.37. This did not use financing. It was purchased outright. We do not have any financing costs that are associated with it. There was no net operating annual costs. What it was purchased for was for a inspection firm that was coming in and helping us with our water treatment plant. We would have to have paid housing for them to use while they were here. So I think the decision was made in 2017 to purchase this condo, so we wouldn't have to have that monthly expense for the years. I believe it was about 2 years and 5 months for the Dewberry engineering inspector to use this. The utilization rate for this condo has been at 78.6%. And the current value, again, based on the La Plata County assessor, is $267,400. What the council is, or what the city manager myself is recommending for the council, is allowing me to continue to lease this out on a short-term use rental. We do have a few positions that are open that we look at filling here pretty soon, and think that this would be a very good use for these condos, at least here for the short, near term, 6 to 9 months, to help us get through a couple of these director searches, as we had mentioned, the 911 director, the public works director position, and then also we were informed with Kathy, a big loss for us, but a Parks and Recreation director position that we'd also having to look to fill. And I will open it up to any questions that we may have.
Let's have a first round of city council questions before I open the public hearing. And ask if there's any, just raise your hand and we'll. Kim? Council?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Brookie. I had a question on the second condo. You mentioned a reduction in a contract price. What was the actual total contract price reduction because of having the condominium available?
I will see if Jared has that answer. Who's right there, seeing as in 2017. And maybe I may have used the wrong words of reduction in contract price, but it would have been something that we would have been on the hook for, as I was understood, to house them in responsible portion for. And instead of doing that, we placed we purchased the home to place them in, so we didn't have that cost associated with it. So it may not be an actual cost reduction, but there was a cost that we looked at, I guess, financing through, well, not finance, take that back, purchasing this condo and using it through that. So I'll pass it over to Jared Biggs, our Assistant Director of Utilities.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Okay. And so the second condo is condo number 243. This was purchased on June 6th, 2017. It was purchased for $240,693.37.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Baxter. Per Jose's explanation, it was really cost avoidance. We were under contract to provide Dewberry Engineering housing for that contract engineering inspector at GSA lodging prices for Durango. When you do the math on on that monthly pricing at about 85% occupancy, because the inspector did go back home to Denver to see his family on occasion. We estimated we probably saved approximately $91,200 in that Dewberry contract by having the condo, letting them live there instead of making GSA rated lodging payments.
Okay, so then what I understand is we paid $241,000 to save $91,000.
We paid, yes, $241,000 to save 91, but the value is that we didn't lose that asset value. We can still either turn that condo asset into back into dollars, probably at an increased amount, or alternatively use it for other city purposes.
So I'm challenged by both the numbers on both the condos to see how we actually end up within the net. So one of them was purchased in 2008, and even if you look at 20 years later, we're not going to have paid for it by our usage, or the other one also in 20 years. So I don't have an issue with this year continuing to use it to house new hires and allow them to rent it at a market rate. But I absolutely believe that council needs to have a pretty significant conversation, whether it's this council or the next one, about what the goal is for owning these and why we have them. I think that the other one of the reasons for buying it was to provide affordable housing for our staff, and I don't really think that that's been accomplished if you look at how often it's actually been rented. And I would suggest that possibly these two condos could become our first units in our attainable housing program and be sold or leased to people who meet that 80 to 120% AMI, and we get our project rolling, and or it gets sold. So I really think, and then the money goes back into our housing program that we want to start. I'd love to see Kevin develop one, in the next 3 months so we can get moving on it. So I am looking forward to the conversation that we have, how we can use taxpayer dollars that have been spent on these condos to actually create attainable housing for our workforce in the community.
I would just jump in. Thank you, Councilor Baxter. When I just did the numbers, I would ask this finance director and Jose, is this the kind of return on investment we expect with city resources? And I understand the need to address a short-term issue of housing for contractors, but long-term, I don't see this as a viable investment, or even I would question an appropriate investment. I would support it being used in the immediate future. I recognize with the people coming in that there's a need for that, but I would like to see us look at, or a rationale for why we would not consider putting this on the market and taking the proceeds and investing in something related to workforce housing as was the original intent. Thank you.
Councilor Bettine.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment since I was on council when the first decision was made. It was a detailed analysis, and I think perhaps if council does that analysis for the future, they should look at the math carefully. I think what Jared said is accurate. It's hard to discern on this television screen, but the math is really clear on that the city was investing in an asset. It was an appreciating asset, has appreciated over that time, significantly, in fact. And so those dollars are secured. They have a particular use in the city, and whether the city decides to stay with the course and has recruiting needs or staffing needs like they did for the city manager and his family, that may be the case. But either way, it was a good use of city funds. It was a clear, non-controversial 5-0 decision to purchase those at the time, and the math was incredibly clear. So we should definitely look at a detailed analysis. We're going to have that conversation in the future. Thanks.
Melissa, thank you. Okay.
Thank you guys for the dialogue. I think that one of the things I can definitely add or contribute, agree with you all. I was very happy we had this asset for our new city manager. That was a wonderful use, and I was glad that it was there. I believe he had his entire family in it for a while, and so that was a great use. Makes me wonder too, just to add to this thought, seeing that I do recall, as Councilor Patine was saying, when we purchased it for the use that we did, and it makes me wonder if we have this upcoming water treatment facility potential upgrade, and or however we go on that one, if the same usage could be applied. In any case, moving forward, I would definitely suggest that our city manager has requested with our 3 executive director searches that we leave these available for now. And these are still assets that we have on our books, and they are still appreciating in the interim. So I would support the continuation in the short term as Jose has requested.
Thank you so much. And I'll just add to the comment too. I share no concerns about the investment that was made by previous councils. It was logical, and I think it, to scrutinize it at this point, just looking at the utilization rates and what the recovery was, is ill-founded evaluation and metrics utilized to make that assessment. That we were faced with a large cost to house the inspector for the sewer treatment plant. It was, an investment in real estate. I think if we look at it and really want to look at the metrics that they've appreciated beyond what their beyond the expenses that have been incurred. And anybody that's in the market right now knows that real estate is probably one of your better investments if you can get in. So I think some of the concerns that have been voiced are ill-founded. And we should really look at saving this asset as a recruitment tool, as well as an opportunity for any of our employees to be housed whenever there's a problem arises in their family. And I think it's good to keep both of these properties in the city ownership. So with that, I'd like to open the public hearing.
If I can.
So Jose?
Just wanted to clear up just a couple of things. Just an update really is staff is still looking into, and as well as Dirk, on the loan, the mortgage for the condo of number 142. We were all, I think, shocked that there was a mortgage there. We did not know. So we're kind of going back through it and just kind of making sure that we get the history of it and get a better feel of exactly kind of how the loan is structured and what that all entailed. So I just wanted to make sure that the council knows that was something that we did not know. The staff here was not in there at that time. And so we're just trying to piece together the information to make sure that we are in compliance with everything that is out there. And if not, that we would make those remedies available as soon as we are able to confirm.
Thank you, Jose. With that, I'd like to open the public hearing and invite anybody that's listening in to either join us by Zoom by using the raise hand function, or if you're on the phone, call in using *9, and Mitchell can recognize you and invite you into our meeting, at which point you will just unmute yourself by pushing *6 on your phone. And so, Mitchell, is there anybody we can invite in for public participation or public testimony?
Yes, Mayor. We do have a couple people who have raised their hand. The first one I see is a phone number ending in 2752. I have invited you to speak. Please press *6 to unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record and whether or not you are a city resident.
My name is Sweetie Marbury, and I am a city resident. My name is Sweetie Marbury, and I am a city resident. And I called back in because I disagree with Councilor Baxter and Noseworthy. The only way I see to increase workforce housing, there's two ways. One is the annexation of new land to add the possibility of workforce housing. And the other possibility is also changing the no lot sizes for accessory dwelling units in EN 1, 2, and 3. The idea of selling the condos doesn't make any sense. That's not going to add to workforce housing. The condos are assets, and they have gained in their value to the city. New employees could use them, as the city manager just did. Unless the city manager is going to promote from within, then there will always be the possibility of directors coming from out of town and needing housing while they become acquainted with the city of Durango. So I support the short-term housing, and I think it was a wise use of city funds when they were bought in 2008 and 2017. They may not be at 100% usage, but I guarantee you the values are there. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Marbury. And Mitchell, do we have other testimony this evening?
Yes, the next person on the list is John. John, I have invited you to speak. Please unmute yourself. Give us your first and last name for the record, whether or not you are a city resident. You have 3 minutes.
Thanks. My name is John Simpson. I am a city resident. Jose kind of hit my question at that unit 142. There's long-term debt, and it's not shown in the CAFR. The CAFR report was pretty good today, and then that issue got brought up, was that we have this long-term debt that the citizens didn't vote on. It's not in the CAFR. Something needs to be looked into there. Why didn't we have an election for that? With that, the certificate of participation in the CAFR is a similar issue where that wasn't voted by the citizens. So 142, appreciate you saying that, Jose. I'm looking into that. 242, it's the sewer fund. And so I think, whether you sell it or don't sell it, the important thing is that the sewer fund isn't supplementing the general fund. Whoever stays there, the city manager, the police chief, the HR, there needs to be a transparent transfer of the value of the rent of that apartment from the general fund to the sewer fund, so that the sewer fund is being reimbursed for that. The other option is to sell the apartment from the sewer fund to the general fund, and then whoever stays there in the HR department or the city manager, that transaction doesn't have to occur. But there's been a lot of misuse of the enterprise funds in the general fund, and this is one example of how that can happen. And then finally, they sound affordable, but I've stayed in temporary housing in different jobs, and once you get your W-2 with the taxable income, because that is a taxable benefit, the rent that you stay, that's a big chunk of change that the employee is responsible for as that taxable benefit. So, when you're doing your numbers, consider that as well, that the employee will be paying state and federal taxes on that benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. And with that, Mitchell, any further testimony?
Mayor, nobody else has raised their hand, but we do still have quite a few in the attendee list. If you are here to speak to this agenda item, please utilize the raise hand function now.
If not, I'd like to close the public hearing and move back into any further questions of Jose or staff before I call for a motion. Seeing none, I have called for a motion.
I'm looking for the motion. I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure what motion okay, here, I think I found it. I believe that I found the motion to direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance authorizing the city manager to establish and administer short-term agreements for city-owned residential properties to support city recruitment, staffing, and city project efforts.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please?
I think we need discussion before the roll call, Dean.
We had discussion twice already, so, but
Yeah,
certainly.
but Robert's rules calls for the option of discussion if anyone wants to after the motion before the vote is taken.
And I did, and I will, and okay, if anybody would like to make a further comment, I would welcome it at this point.
Thank you. I'm happy to support this motion, but I just want to ensure that we are going to do an research and study on the best, highest and best use of the tax dollars that are currently in this asset, and see what the numbers play out before we make a final decision as to how we're going to use the assets.
Any further comment? Great. May we have a roll call?
I was just slow. I think I already made that case that I would also like to see a full analysis for future use, but I do support this current motion.
I think you did make that case. So with that, we'll have a roll call, please.
Councilor Bettine
Yes.
and Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
and Mayor Bricky.
Yes. Thanks so much. And we'll move on to quasi-judicial hearings. We have no items on our quasi-judicial hearings this evening. So we'll move on to agenda item 12, which is introduction of ordinances. We have the first one is 12.1, an ordinance abandoning a portion of the public right-of-way adjacent to the property at 170 West 29th Street and declaring an effective date. If we could have Dirk Nelson describe this ordinance, that'd be awesome.
Yes, briefly, this is a follow-up to a hearing conducted 2 weeks ago to abandon a small parcel of property in the right-of-way. It's about 200 square feet that was inadvertently not abandoned during a prior abandonment. This abandonment does, the statute allows for the city to abandon right-of-way. And this one, as we do with all abandonments, we reserved easements for utilities and drainage issues. So I recommend council approve the ordinance abandoning this small tract of property.
And Dirk, may we have the ordinance number for future motion?
Yes, this will be ordinance 2021-8.
Very good. And with the introduction of ordinances, we don't have public hearings. So if we have questions of council for our city attorney, we'd entertain those at this point. Hearing none, I'd call for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve 2021-8 ordinance.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. We will have time for additional questions of our city attorney. Seeing none, maybe we have a roll call, please.
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
and Mayor Bricky.
Yes, thank you so much. And with that, we'll move on to agenda item 13, which is administrative items, starting with 13.1, a discussion and possible action regarding Senate Bill 21-062, which is and a letter in support of that particular Senate bill. And I might pass it to Jose to introduce our Police Chief, Bob Raymond.
Yes, Mayor and Council, my pleasure to introduce Police Chief Bob Rammer on the action that he's requesting on the letter from the City Council. Obviously, this is something that he had asked if the City Council would be interested in, and to get direction, definitely have to place it on an agenda. So I placed it on this council agenda for him to talk about some of the concerns he has related to the operations of the police department with the bill that he thinks that would be impede upon his ability. So wanted to give him the opportunity to speak with council and allow him to outline his concerns. Chief?
Thank you, City Manager. Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. Thank you for taking this time this evening to hopefully have a greater understanding about what the potential consequences of Senate Bill 2162 is going to have with our community. As we know, the COVID pandemic has affected jail populations across this country. It hasn't precluded us here locally either. And we're still trying to understand what those effects are of those jail reductions, of bond reform, of not having the ability to incarcerate certain violators within our community up until the point where they can see a judge and or be removed from the street up until the point where they can cease and we can interrupt their criminal behaviors. We've seen a pretty dramatic increase in crime locally here in Durango. We're not immune to that across the state. The CBI, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, recently reviewed their reports, and the state has seen an increase in crime. I've included some of that information from some of the other jurisdictions, their concerns or letters of opposition that they've cited in an agenda packet for y'all to review, along with the bill itself and where we stand as Colorado chiefs across the state. There are a lot of concerns that come along with it. As we reviewed this through our legislative policy groups with the Colorado Associations of Chiefs of Police, we've become more aware, more educated, and we understand this bill better. We see a lot of promise with this bill in the future, but currently right now, we don't really understand the effects of what crime is and how jail reduction and bond reduction is going to assist us with our efforts as we move towards restorative justice. There's, again, a lot of unknowns out there right now. We see promise with this bill, but it has to be an entire systemic change within the criminal justice system where we all support each other. We all support our efforts in order to make this what our society really wants. And right now, as I stated, it's a little premature to understand that. I've shared with y'all my crime statistics as they've come out every single week, even on a monthly basis, and I have some of those we can share today that reflect, the downturns at the initial portion of the pandemic and what happened last summer and how we're continuing to see these issues. With the Senate Bill 62, basically, we're not going to be able to arrest hardly anybody for anything that they do not commit if it's not a class 1, 2, or a 3 felony. So if it's a class 4, 5, or 6 felony, any municipal charge, any traffic violation, any petty offense, and or many other status offenses to include felony drug level charges, we're going to either have to release them on a summons, which we mainly do right now as is, and or we're going to have to not arrest them at all or take them to the jail, and we can expect them to be released on a personal recognizance bond. And some of those issues we've seen, and I have examples if you so choose for me to provide those to you, what those consequences are when we're not able to keep somebody in an incarcerated safe setting until they see a judge, and a judge is able to look at the totality of somebody's history and the circumstances that are surrounding the probable cause that the officer is able to substantiate. And I mean, these are crazy things such as theft. I mean, we're not going to be able to take somebody into custody for theft up to $100,000, which is a class 4 felony. Burglaries, we're not going to be able to arrest people on. Auto theft. The list just goes on and on and on. Though there are some exceptions if people have continuation of bad habits and we can prove that, we can substantiate that their acts are not going to stop if we're not going to take them into jail. There's other ones if they're going to be a risk posed to society. But a lot of times those factors are unarticulable. They're just known by the officer. Officers know these violators intimately. They know exactly who they are. They know them by sight. They know their names. They know their date of birth by memory. And how many of us can say that with our own children's dates of birth and sometimes our anniversaries? We don't know, things that well. And that's how intimately our officers know these people that are on the street. So again, this is very concerning legislation that we see. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Multiple judicial districts have already written letters of opposition. I know Fort Collins, their city council has written a letter of opposition. The municipal mayors around the Denver area have written letters of opposition. And as I said, many judicial districts have as well. And locally, myself, Sheriff Valdez from Archuleta County, Chief Kirk Phillips from Ignacio, Chief Vernon Knuckles from Cortez PD, Sheriff Steve Nallen from Montezuma County, Joe McIntyre, the Marshal from Bayfield, and the Marshal from Town of Mancos, Justin Goodall, have written our letters of opposition to this as well. We believe that it's, there must be more reform as it is. Currently, these essentially policies are policies right now that are issued by our chief judge. But what we don't want this to do is to be solidified into law, because that takes the discretionary aspect away from our officers, and it's going to hinder our ability to protect our community, and which is in alignment with some of your strategy from your strategic plan as we rethink, reimagine policing, and as we try to strengthen our involvement with our residents and safety throughout the community under enhanced livability and sense of place. So I'd like to open this up to discussion if there is any questions to this. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Chief. And for the public to know, this is a request of the Chief to formulate a letter and send it to the state legislature for consideration in opposition of this particular bill. Councilor Noseworthy.
Thank you. And thank you, Chief. You used the term kind of premature to understand the bill, and I'm not in a position to defend or argue the bill, but I do want to share with council what I took on as my homework to address this. And I'd like to suggest that I don't think this is a fully balanced approach. So I called Barbara McLaughlin to get her take on the bill, and it hasn't come to her yet. It's still going through, I think it's even still in committee. So there's an effort to try to kill this bill before it even gets a full review. Although she did tell me that Senator Pete Lee, who is the author of this bill, is, quote, the most trusted lawyer in the Senate. So I then called Senator Pete Lee, to get his take on why this bill, what are the issues around it. And I shared that information with council, some of the supporting arguments, his op-ed piece. And this is really I'm going to paraphrase him, but he did spend time with me on the phone. This bill really affects people of color in a lot more than other folks, and people who are poor and the mentally ill. And so there's a whole rationale of why to support this bill, which we haven't explored. I then spoke with Sheriff Sean Smith, who testified, and he's the one who administers our jail and is impacted for this and is a strong supporter of this bill, and testified in its support, and actually gave me a rationale for why some of the history with what happened with some of the sheriffs. And I'm starting to think there's more at stake than there can be a little political, this is my view from hearing all of this component to all of this. But Sean also gave me his rationale. And also going back to Pete Lee, what he said to me is that victims from the Rights Act Crime Rights Act, the Victims' Right Act, those people would be jailed. The gun crime, sex abuse, domestic violence, statutory required request, and that there's also, that you can always argue with those that won't. But I was also given the example, and this is from some time ago, of a skateboarder here in Durango who was brought into jail. And so there's also the potential both ways for abuse. And what the sheriff said to me is that we don't have arrest standards here in La Plata County. And this is an effort to really codify the conditions under which we can, arrests can be made and put in jail. And that it would maintain jail for the dangerous people who need to be there. So again, and then also I spoke with Christian Champagne, and Christian, and this was all, I apologize, it was all today that they got back to me. I reached out to them and they got back to me in wonderful order. And Christian, as you know, is the president of the district attorneys, and they took a neutral position, so he can't really convey his personal opinion. He does see some pros and cons of this bill, but he did also say, I'm known to be very much in favor of bail reform and of arrest reform, and this addresses some of that. So my own view, Chief, is that while I know you feel some urgency, I as a council don't, and particularly after I spoke with Barbara McLaughlin, who said it hasn't even gone through the process. So I would I would argue that we need a more balanced approach. I'd really like to, at a minimum, to hear from the sheriff and get a sense, even in a study session, of what the pros and cons are of this without just taking a view of opposition to it. I don't feel like I can address it with any understanding other than, the opinion that you expressed, but I'd also very much like to hear from our other county officials who have thoughts on this before we're asked to do anything. And then I guess I would come back and say that if we did go down this route, I think there, as we have done in the past with Julie Brown's letter, that if it's not unanimous from council, that we only indicate the names of those that support it. Because I really feel we need time, and I would not want this to be rushed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Nosworthy. There's some great points. And if I may address a couple of those. So the one thing is we do have arrest standards here at the Durango Police Department. In our policy, it is dictated within our policy of what we're going to arrest for and what we're not. And we've actually expressed that to the sheriff, and we shared that with him even before the COVID, because he was having jail population issues at certain times where we're experiencing overcrowding. And we've always tried to accommodate that based off of misdemeanor offenses, what we're arresting for, municipal offenses, so on and so forth. And the district attorney has allowed us, as of most recently, which is a great tool for us, to do felony summons and complaint forms, which we did not necessarily have the authority to do for in the past because of the fact that they were felonies, and those are always going to be either in custody or a direct filing or a warrant. So that's extended our ability to take non-violent class 5 and 6 felonies that are non-victims' rights and be able to assign a court date to those people. So those are great things, and we do see some promise with this bill overall. Currently, this bill is sitting in the Appropriations Committee at the Senate currently, and that is the timeliness that I'm looking for at the moment because of the fact that we don't know when this is going to be set for the next read. And that's why cities and counties and chiefs and many sheriffs and marshals across the state are trying to get support from their local policymakers and elected officials in order to move forward. So thank you.
I appreciate, Chief, your service, and I no means want to convey that anything other than that. I just feel it's very important to hear from the law enforcement that also has jurisdiction over our jails, and I'd like to make the request again to get a full spectrum of opinion before asking us to make such an important decision. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I think that's a good suggestion as far as like moving with the jail population portion of it. But the crime issue that's going on within the city, that's my issue. That's what I do. I'm in charge of public safety, and I'm the one that's closest to that problem within the city limits and how that's affecting our residents here. The jail is a partner, and it's certainly something that we have to have consideration with, and we need to work in partnership with the sheriff, who has been, very willing to have these conversations in the past. And I think that it's something that we can certainly move forward, in the future. Our concern, again, is with this being codified into law, because then we're not going to have the ability to have the discretionary aspect in order to police our community and hopefully keep it safe. Because, again, we are seeing some significant concerning trends as they spiral upward.
Councilor Baxter, yeah.
Thank you, Dean. I'm curious because it doesn't sound to me like law enforcement in general is on one side or the other. It's kind of like they're split. The sheriffs seem to be over here and police seem to be over here and district attorneys are in the middle. And so I don't understand that, because it seems to me if this bill was as detrimental to policing and law enforcement as it sounds like it could be, why would not every single law enforcement agency be jumping on it and saying no, 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 no? Or if it's good, why wouldn't they all be jumping on and going yes, 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 yes? And so I'm kind of confused about that. So what's the justification for one way or the other?
I can only speak for who I've spoken with and the names that I just named off. And, that was the Dolores County Sheriff, the Montezuma County Sheriff, the Archuleta County Sheriff. I have had conversations with Sean a couple of weeks ago, Sheriff Smith from Mdna County, and currently right now, Sean sits on the legislative committee for the county sheriffs of Colorado. He was part of the legislation that came about with that. When this bill was first introduced and it was written, it was only presented to certain groups. The Chiefs of Police Association was not provided an opportunity to weigh into it initially. So we had to wait to see what was written and what amendments were provided by many of the sheriffs across the state, and it's only part of that legislation. If you look at some of the attachments that I provided to you, Arapahoe County, Boulder County, or I'm sorry, not Boulder County, Arapahoe County, Adams County, Jefferson, Douglas, Eagle, I can go through the list. There's multiple sheriffs that are not in support of this. They're not taking a neutral stance. From my understanding how I was presented to this was it was the legislative committee that took a neutral stance for the county sheriffs of Colorado. And once more and more was known about this bill and what was being proposed, many of the sheriffs actually opposed it. And currently right now, the county sheriffs of Colorado have actually pulled the neutrality, and they're in an opposition stance currently as is, and that was as of Friday of last week.
Councilor Baxter, if I may also add, I don't want to speak for Sheriff Smith, because I may not get everything accurate, but he did present a history behind how hard groups worked, and then some pressure placed on groups to change positions. So I think that it's all over the map, to your point. And I, having heard from several officials in there, it's interesting how legislation is made, as we all know. So I appreciate the chief's comments, but I also say it would be worth, I think, council hearing from our sheriff as well.
I have a question. So I understand too, Chief Brammer, that we have had, it's a difficult, I'm going to suggest that it is a difficult situation that we're placed in. I find it also interesting that CML is opposing this legislation, as I sent an email to council today, unequivocally. Even if there are amendments made, they will not support this. And I have not been able to get to the bottom as to why. I also know that our municipal judges are against this, and I am not quite certain why that is. But I also know that Judge Wilson, our judge, put an order in that limited who could be put in jail at the beginning of COVID. And we have not had, as we all know, the numbers are down because we were at a high in the 200s, and then we came down to 100. We had to get rid of, because of the COVID, we had to reduce our jail population, which was done. And then it hasn't increased that much. So I guess my question to you is, do you think that supporting this bill is that the city would be less safe as a result of that, in supporting this bill?
Yes, I do. I think if we solidify this into law, we're going to have a much more difficult time in keeping our citizens safe, and we're going to continue to create more victims within our community. The only one I can really comment on is Judge Wilson's judicial order that he put into place. And it's very similar to what this law would be. And that's what I'm stating is currently it's policy. And so with the policy, we have some discretionary aspect that still comes along with that. And that's what we're asking for is something along those lines where it's still going to be providing us with some discretionary aspect to that. We will work within the confines of what the judicial order is, but there's exceptions to every norm, and only the officers that are engaged with these people are going to know that. You can't write, those intuitions into law. It's too difficult. You can't do it. As some of these examples that I have listed is, currently, we had a guy that he went down to one of the stores on Main Avenue, and he basically burglarized. He stole a bunch of stuff. We were able to take him into custody. He went to the jail. He was out on a personal recognizance bond within a couple hours. And 2 days later, he nearly killed somebody, and we had to rearrest him. There's other recidivism type people that we're seeing that we're writing a ticket to and arresting essentially every single week. And so it's the same people that are committing these crimes over and over again, and we know who they are. but we need to be able to put them into essentially a judiciary timeout where a judge and the district attorney and the defense attorneys are going to allow the system in order to take a look at their histories to see, okay, do they need to stay in jail, while they await trial? Or can we put certain bond restrictions on them as we release them back into community, and we do some supervised release in order to ensure that they're not committing more crimes until they do go to trial and there's a consequence and they can, be judged by a jury of their peers. Those are what the things we're asking for. But a blanket policy saying that, the only thing we can arrest for is a felony 1, 2, and 3, and their statutory required ones is going to hinder our ability greatly in order to safeguard this city against violent acts or even any criminal act.
And do you think that your answer, I think you answered it, but that, that the judges wanting to have that opportunity to evaluate each individual situation is why they are against this legislation?
Yeah, that's the judge's role. They take a look at the totality of this, and then they hold, then they decide what community harm is going to be out there. Again, it's a system issue, and our system is not built yet around this restorative justice process that our country's moving towards. I think we'll get there, and I think we will certainly see a lot of bond reform issues. I think we're going to see greater accountability on the front end, where we don't have to keep people in jail, because there's certain people that we don't want to put in jail because it just makes them better criminals. We can ruin people's lives, and that's not our intent. We want to deter people from committing crimes and creating harm within our communities.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Melissa. Councilor Bettine.
Yeah, I just want to come out in support of this letter. I think the rising crime rates that we've experienced in our community and have witnessed in others are palpable and something we need to consider strongly. The timing of this particular bill is unfortunate, and perhaps it would be viewed differently if it was timed at a time when we weren't faced with this kind of upsurge in crime. It's compelling to me that CML is opposing this. I think we should be paying attention to that. Our own chief and police department are against this. People who've been willing to adjust to modern policing practices. I recall when we were confronting the 8 Can't Wait police reform movement, and I was awfully proud of our police department to know that they had already done all of those things in advance. And, they're coming to us saying, hey, this is a bridge too far. I think we need to listen to them. Our police chief here is telling us he is in agreement with incarceration rates going down and for some methodology to be enforced, but that the timing's wrong and that this bill is a little too boilerplate. I think we need to listen to that. And, the fact that the serious crimes that are illuminated on our document and that have been discussed tonight cannot be arrested for is probably enough for me, candidly, to tell the legislator to take a pause. And to Councilor Noseworthy's point that it's too early when it's in committee, I think having watched that process over the years, this is the best time to actually address it and send a letter. You want to kill a bill like this when it's in committee so that it doesn't have the chance of passing and can be reworked in an appropriate fashion. So I'd love to see this letter go to our legislature and very much in support of it, ready to vote to have it done.
And I would just like to add that the supporting list include people in support of this bill include our top law officer, the Attorney General, is in support of this. Phil Weisner is in support of this bill. And so again, I think that this warrants greater discussion, greater conversation between multiple peace officers. And to Melissa's point, I would even welcome judges. I'd like to hear what they think rather than speculating on why they are in support of this bill. So again, we're talking a study session that could be next week so that we have greater information and a balanced approach to making a decision.
So I'm not certain that that at our level that we can be informed enough to make a decision on this. What I'm feeling in this conversation is that the legislature has done a very poor job of writing or attempting to write a piece of legislation that is embraced by the people who are supposed to be following it. And that concerns me. It feels almost partisan to me in this whole situation. So I actually would like to do exactly what Councilor Norsworthy is suggesting, except task the legislature with doing that. So I think that the best way to make that happen and to have a bill written that actually will achieve the goals that we'd all like to see happen, less crime, bad people put away or pay for their crimes, whichever, is to say, no, you guys need to start over. So that's just my opinion.
I'll weigh in too. I think I agree totally point by point with Councilor Bettine but I also respect everybody's comments in terms of how we, what the action of Durango City Council in support or against at this point would provide. And to Councilor Baxter's point, I do think they need to send it back, and that's why I would. To me, that's the point at which I would decide to suggest that it needs to go back and support the chief's letter and to say that and say it does need to be reworked. I look at the municipal judges, and as to Councilor Noseworthy's point, I don't know why they would have, I don't know, I don't discount their judgment. They are judges. I also respect Phil Weiser, our Attorney General, and respect him fully too. But as it relates to us, as in our city limits in Durango, Colorado, it just doesn't. The actual words that we can read today and make our own minds up about how it impacts our lives and the lives of our citizens in the city of Durango. It seems that it just is not the right words. It's not the right legislation that creates better law enforcement in our city. So from that standpoint, I would send it back and ask them to rework it. And I think this letter would support others in asking that same question.
Mayor, I don't believe your current letter as sent to us includes that language. It's opposition to it. It doesn't call for support for the concept, but working it so that it's more amenable. Your letter right now as written, unless I'm mistaken, calls for opposition, not some way of support of the concept, but a reworking of the legislation.
Yeah, I would prefer that the letter be written to support them going back and making it work for a larger majority of our people who have to enforce these laws, rather than just saying, no, I don't like the idea. So I'd support that, the change in the letter.
And I would like to see the letter drafted before a vote, because it's quite different from what we have in front of us.
Well, we certainly could take a motion to revise the letter and have it reviewed before it's sent out, rather than wait for 2 weeks from tonight to make a decision, because at that point it's relatively moot. So I would, we can, we've got three alternatives: either support, not support, or table for further consideration. And I think
I'll make a motion if you'd like, Dean.
Surely, you bet.
I would move that we approve a letter to the legislature or whoever it's supposed to go to, rewritten to show that we support changes in good policing, but not these particular changes at this time. And we would like them to go back to the drawing board to get better consensus among all the organizations.
And would you amend that motion to also say that it's followed by a study session in which we can have more detailed information about the issues surrounding this bill?
No, I would not. Sorry.
There's been a motion. Do I hear a second?
So you guys just want to send the letter as is, as an opposition, I guess.
The other couple follow-up questions. Chief Brammer, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts, on if you would be comfortable redoing a letter. And, you know, we know that you're opposed to the idea of limiting your ability. But if the language could be recrafted, if we could support legislation that could recraft it in a way that didn't stop your ability, and still allowed us to get to the goals, is that something you would be comfortable with? Or are you in a position like CML is, which is no matter what the amendment is, they will not support?
Currently, the stance that we have taken as the chiefs of this state was to strictly oppose it. Because of the fact that any amendments to it is going to include a lot of the original language that's currently written into it. We feel by killing it within legislation is going to allow us to do exactly what Mayor Pro Tem was talking about, of doing a start over and building this thing back up from the ground up. We don't think that we can work it from the top down. We think that we must be included in these further conversations, and that we must be at the table when those conversations are being had, so we can work with the legislation and the other groups that are proposing this and work it up into a usable format from all angles.
So I would amend my motion to say that we would not support the bill as currently written, but would support them going back to make changes to gain greater consensus among the authorities and the municipalities. I don't want to just say no. I want to say, here's what we want you to do. We want you to be successful, and we want Chief Bramer to get the tools he needs, and we want you to listen to the community, not just no, we don't like this. So I would amend it to say that if you were interested in seconding that.
I'm curious, can you repeat then the motion that is currently on the
I would suggest that we rewrite our letter to state that we do not support the bill as it's currently written, and would like them to go back to the drawing board. I don't know how you say these things in a letter, but go back to the drawing board and start over with the concept of providing better tools for our law enforcement to do their jobs.
And my question, yeah.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say, which I believe is the exact same thing as opposing it and killing it, and then they go back, correct?
Yeah, but our letter doesn't ask them to do their job better. It doesn't ask them to find a way to give tools to our law enforcement to do a better job, or to keep criminals off the streets, or however we want to look at it. It just says, no, we don't like your idea. And I don't mind saying, no, we don't like your idea, but I also really would like to encourage them to do the right thing by our law enforcement.
I particularly like Councilor Baxter's suggestion, and it doesn't seem like that's a big shift, or it sounds like a reasonable addition can be made to the existing letter to be recrafted to soften it to that level. And I'd be willing to sign that after concurrence by council via email later this week.
And I wouldn't use the word soften, Dean. I think you can voice that opposition as firmly as you wish.
Yeah.
You're calling for a vote, Dean? Is that a second?
Not yet. We have a motion that's been made. We are.
Because I would like to reiterate that I'm not convinced I'm opposed to this. So until I have information, I don't feel like I can support and ask them to even come back and rework it, because I don't feel as though I've heard all sides to this issue. I understand the issues around it. When the judges are in support, when our sheriff is in support, I want to hear all sides. So I can't say I'm for it or against it, but I can say I'm not definitely opposed to it. So that makes it very difficult for me to support saying to legislators, go back and do something different, particularly when the Attorney General supports it.
Yeah, similarly, I've read it. I can understand the words that are included in the bill. I understand the impact it would have to our community, and I understand the stance that CML has taken on behalf of communities throughout the state of Colorado, and I'm ready to help our law enforcement, come to a better conclusion. So come to a better bill. And so I think what Councilor Baxter has proposed is a reasonable compromise and so to answer this question in a timely manner. So we do have a motion on the floor. It has not been seconded. So to answer your question, Barbara, I've not asked for a vote yet. So thanks.
Do you want to second it, Dean?
Pardon?
You want to second the motion?
I do. It's been moved. Do I hear a second?
No, do you want to second it was what I was asking.
Oh.
But if anybody else wants to, that's okay too.
Actually, I've never done that before, but this could be unprecedented action.
I will second it.
Thank you.
It has been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, I'll ask for a roll call, please, Ben. Ben, if you're still with us.
Yes, sir. Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy,
No.
and Mayor Bricky.
Yes. So motion passes, and I thank you, everybody, for a really good discussion around this delicate issue. So thank you all. With that, we'll move on to, we'll expect a slight redraft, and that'll be circulated for all councilors to review prior to sending this thing out. So thanks, everybody. With that, we'll move on to 13.2, which is a discussion and possible action regarding a letter of support for FTA section 5339 for the low or no emission vehicle grant application. So hopefully this one is not as controversial and it has some benefit for our community. So with that, we'll have a staff report.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mayor and Council. And Mitchell, if I could get you to grab Amber and place her on the panelist, I'd appreciate it. I don't have that ability in this meeting, so. And I will pass it to Amber to discuss this item on the FTA section 5339 low emission. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Jose. Good evening, Mayor Brookie and members of the City Council. This evening, we have a request for a letter of support for FTA section 5339 low or no emissions vehicle grant application that the city would like to submit in coordination with Archuleta County for electric vehicle charging stations, as well as the first electric transit fleet in our region. This is a joint application between the city and Archuleta County. And we have a partnership with LPEA, who have indicated that they will be contributing a local match of no less than $15,000 and up to $20,000 towards the project cost, as well as additional in-kind installation expenses. This grant application, if we are awarded the funding, will install electric vehicle fleet charging stations out at the Durango Service Center in Bodo, as well as over in Archuleta County. The Mountain Express Transit bus will be running at least once a day, 5 days a week between Pagosa Springs to Durango, bringing the first intercity route along that path to Durango. We're very excited about this opportunity, and it is the first application of this kind that we're moving forward with, and it will move us forward significantly with achieving council's goals to move into the electric fleet and electric transit world for the city of Durango. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have related to this application and the project.
Thank you, Amber. And so with that, we'll open it up for any questions of Amber. And again, we will not have a public hearing on this particular issue, but it'll be a council decision that we'll bring to a vote at the end of this discussion. Any questions? Wow, great presentation, Amber. We do have, I see Ben having his hand raised there. I assume that might be relative to election results. If I can hold, if we can just go ahead and call for a motion on this particular action, then we could get election results in just one moment. So with that, I'd entertain a motion.
Because I'm so excited about having EV vehicles transporting people around our community, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the letter of support for FTA Section 5339 for low and no emission vehicle grant application.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? With that, Ben, I'd ask for a roll call, please.
Definitely. Councillor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councillor Bettine,
Yes.
Councillor Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Berkey.
Yes. Thank you so much. And with that, we can cheer. We can another unanimous vote. So thank you so much for bringing this to the city of Durango, Amber. I appreciate it. And with that, before we move on to item 13.4, the city update, I think Ben has some election results possibly for us.
Yes, sir. So we have unofficial election results. And so we'll just go down the candidates and how many votes that they got unofficially in order on the ballot. So we have Olivier Bosmans with 1,847 votes. Harrison Went with 942 votes. Seth Furtney with 1,604 votes. Frank Lockwood with 1,791 votes. Jessica Buell with 2,671 votes, and Melissa Youssef with 3,766 votes. So those are unofficial results, and we will have those posted on our website as well. And we're also regarding question 1A for the lodger's tax. We are seeing 2,563 votes for yes, and we have 2,404 votes for no.
And Ben, are those final results, or those are still interim results?
They're unofficial results. There's still a process afterwards where we certify the election, and there's opportunities that we're re-verifying those numbers, but right now they are unofficial.
Okay, and would you say that is all votes have been counted at this point, subject to verification?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Thank you very much, Ben. And with that, we'll move on to item 13.4, which is the city update. Our city manager, Jose Madrigal.
I do believe there was, Mayor, one item before that on the discussion of possible action concerning appointing goals.
You are totally right. 13.3 is discussion and possible action regarding the appointee 2021 goals. And I might just kick this one off. It was a city council's request of each of our three appointees, that being the city manager, the city attorney, and the municipal court judge, to establish to draft a list of goals for their own operation this coming year. And we are in receipt of those goals. And I'm wondering if council, I'm looking around to council to see if those goals need to be discussed in detail this evening. We do, I guess, have each, I know we have the city attorney and Jose with us tonight. I'm not sure about our municipal court judge, but we'll just open it up for discussion and see where this goes. I'm thankful for each of them for having provided us with those goals and taking the time to do that. So with that, Jose, unless you had a presentation in mind, I'll just open it up for questions from council to any of the three appointees. subject to their goals as submitted. Kim.
Jose, is Erin still with us?
She is. There she is.
Hi.
She is.
And this kind of applies to Dirk and to James Casey. I noticed that in Dirk's goals, there was one that concerned rewriting some things that dealt with the court. And I was wondering, and that wasn't in the municipal judge's goals. And I was wondering if he knew that and if they were going to need to work together on that. And if so, if maybe James's needed to be amended to include that, or is there no impact on him, or how's that working?
I think we would obviously coordinate. I have had discussions with the municipal judge in general about this topic in the past. So certainly we'll coordinate with everyone involved to make sure that we all approach it from a standpoint that works for everyone. Again, this is just for public. There's been a discussion for a while about potentially working toward decriminalization of certain items in municipal court, which coordinates a little bit with the discussion you had earlier. So, and of course that would involve the chief and, the prosecutors and the judge. And so we would all work together on that. And again, this is a goal to evaluate it, not necessarily a goal to make the change. So I think those discussions would have to happen.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Any other specifics? I think as anticipated, the city manager had the longest list, and given the broadest scope of his challenge, his job, not to discount the city attorney, because his job is as broad as anything that happens in the community, so it's pretty broad as well, but certainly not as many individual tasks as the city manager might have before him. So, but the challenge before us tonight is just to approve those goals as submitted. And if there's no further conversation, I would entertain a motion.
I had a question, just in the sense of, will we be maintaining those goals on the website in some location?
That's probably a question for our HR director, if that's something of that nature. This is proprietary. I don't see why not, obviously.
Well, it's public information right now, so I just think it's important to have that in front of us on a regular basis of what we're expecting our appointees to be focusing on.
If I can add, I think that's a great question. I can look into that on how to best do that.
Thank you, Aaron. And again, with there's no further discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we accept our appointees' goals as submitted.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. May we have a roll call, please, Ben?
Councilor Noseworthy,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Baxter,
Yes.
Councilor Bettine,
Yes.
Councilor Youssef,
Yes.
and Mayor Bricky.
Yes, thank you so much. And with that, we move on to 13.4, which is the city update. And I'll ask our city manager to kick that off.
Mayor and Council, I do not have any items for a city update, but will just provide an update on a citizen comment at the very beginning of the meeting about a sales tax report, and we will have that for the next meeting. Was just confirming with Cynthia that she has all the information to give a good financial report and a thorough financial report, and she confirmed that she has, and we are catching up as we go through. So appreciate the patience of the council, and we will have that at our next meeting. Thank you.
And Jose, if I could just add, I think it's really important. Sales tax is one data point, but for me, it's the overall health of the of the office of the general fund of all of our enterprise funds. And so I appreciate the work that's been made over the summer and recognize that regular monthly reports are coming and that we're in a period of transition. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Noseworthy. We are transitioning over to OpenGov. So that's also a whole other transition that we're going through for the transparency. And they all haven't fallen into piece all immediately quite yet, but our finance staff continues to do an amazing job working hard and going through with that. So very, very excited about what those financial reports will look like here in the next few months.
Thank you so much. With that, we'll move on to council reports and actions. And I might be the first to congratulate, first off, Melissa, Councilor Youssef, for what appears to be a re-election for another 4 years on Durango City Council. So thank you for that, and as well as Jessica and Olivier for what appears to be at this point a position of on Durango City Council. So I think with that, we like to thank all the candidates for having the courage to run really great campaigns. I thought this particular year, and unfortunately, there's only 3 slots. So, but I would like to congratulate everybody and Jessica Buell, Olivier Bosnans, and Melissa Youssef. So, thank you so much. With that, first up for council reports and actions. Mayor Pro Tem Baxter, you care to start? Or
sure.
Have anything to report?
I can do that. It was nice having a week off.
Yeah.
Actual
totally.
city council meetings. I mean, I still went to a ton of meetings, but this was nice. So Monday night was the Infrastructure Advisory Board meeting. And it was kind of interesting because we followed up, one of the things we followed up on was the 2020 Water Master Plan that analyzed 2 design study options for increasing our water treatment capabilities. One of them, which was the Ridges Basin, and then the other one is maximizing the use of the College Mesa plant and rehabbing it so it was capable of doing that. And there were a couple of comments that were made by the board that we didn't have in our conversation, and I thought that they were very interesting. So I wanted to kind of just let council know what a couple of things that were mentioned. One of them was that one of the reasons why the board did not focus on expanding College Mesa and rehabbing College Mesa as the redundant water source was that in the past they had been told that College Mesa was not capable of that. And so when SEH brought in a very highly qualified, the other gentleman who spoke with us, person who can assess on an engineering level water treatment plants, he was able to determine that in their opinion, it was capable of that. So that was a significant shift in what the board had been, what premise the board had been working from. The other interesting thing that I thought was a good comment was when you're talking about redundancy, we wanted redundancy in treatment and in a water source. College Mesa under this plan would have both. So they would have 2 water treatment trains, which we talked about. So we have water treatment redundancy there in case one of them fails. College Mesa also has the capability of taking water from the Florida River or directly from the Animas River or from the Lake Nighthorse water. So in reality, there's 3 sources of water for the College Mesa plan. And I don't know, we didn't talk about that, but Ridges Basin would only be redundant as a treatment source. It would only have 1 water source. So it actually wouldn't have water source redundancy. And that was another benefit in favor of the College Mesa option. So they obviously did not vote on bringing that report forward because it's still in draft form. And so there will be a little bit more work done on it. And then my understanding from the conversation is it'll go to public comment before it gets finalized and comes back to us. So that portion of the meeting was absolutely great. Does anybody have any questions about that part?
I'll be cautionary, and there's the physical aspect as well as the social aspect. And one of the earlier conversations was what it would take to create more a plant of larger capacity at College Mesa, and the physical size of that was expressed concern of neighbors, property owners, particularly Sky Ridge and the adjacent county properties that abut the reservoir up at College Mesa. And so I just caution folks about a little bit of history on opposition from a physical standpoint of enlargement of any facility. We tried to put solar collectors up there once and had significant community pushback as well, just for incorporation of solar collectors as a visual intrusion. And so I'm happy that I don't have to deal with the public opposition to something of that nature. So, but I'm happy that they had that additional outside engineering approach and have some alternative thoughts. And I think that's beneficial to the community, most definitely. So with that, yeah.
No, I'm not done. I just wanted to, this was a big meeting.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry. The other thing that pertained specifically to what we were talking about had to do with the forest health and source water quality update. And we were talking about the conversation that council had about SWIFT. And Jared mentioned that SWIFT and that group was supposed to be doing a wildfire watershed assessment, which would show the impact on our watershed of where we needed to mitigate and how much needed to be mitigated. And that's one of those things that we actually need in order to determine whether or not this plan benefits us in the way that we would like it to. And that assessment has not been done, and it's kind of been put on the back burner. So that's unfortunate, but I'm going to ask Aaron whether or not he'd be willing to move that up on the priority list. We also had some big conversations about, what was it called? Streets, alley improvement discussion. So the alleys have been assessed, and we can get a report on that from Jared and Levi. And the challenge is that there are like 5 alleys that can be easily paved and taken care of, but the vast majority of them have significant problems. However, staff has been really creative, and they're looking at like a French drain type of situation. And normally those go horizontally underneath the water, underneath the streets to collect the water. But because of our the way that the alleys are, that probably wouldn't work very well. So they have thought, hey, what if we stick it vertically in the ground and do it that way? And I'm not going to even get into the conversations we had about the engineering and everything, but I just want to give kudos to staff for looking at something in a very creative way. There may be some issues with, because some of these may go as low as 40 feet down below the surface. So there may be some issues with injection well questions. So they're going to have to figure all these things out, but there may be some way to help with the water drainage so that so more alleys can get fixed in a different manner. So they're doing a great job. I think they're asking all the right questions. It's very exciting. So thank you. That's it.
That is exciting, Kim. Thanks for that update. That's a dry well instead of a tie into our sewer system would be a really, as well as other impervious technologies that exist now that have not yet been considered. So very good. Moving around, Councillor Youssef, and soon to be Councillor Youssef.
Thank you. That's right. Thank you. I appreciate it very much. My head is spinning. So thank you guys for I don't know, this forum is interesting when you rerun, and I know many people have done this in the past, but predecessors before me have had to sit through meetings while you wait for the results and then hear the results while you're sitting in a meeting. It's an interesting way of doing it. But anyway.
Don't ever let them see you sweat. And yeah, it's virtual. You're not in a room. Yeah, you're
I have
okay.
a little advantage to be able to at least have the Zoom protection. But a couple things that I wanted to just touch base on is we did have the La Plata County Forward Together Forum with our Colorado State Representative Barbara McLaughlin and the La Plata County Commissioners, Town of Bayfield, Ignacio, City of Durango with our Mayor Dean Brookie and myself as representatives. And it was a great evening and a nice opportunity to talk about region-wide initiatives. We talked about broadband, the American Rescue Plan, we talked about fire mitigation, and we talked about opportunities to address affordable and attainable housing region-wide and the opportunities to reinvigorate the Regional Housing Alliance. So that was a really good call and good forum and a nice opportunity to connect with our neighbors, if you will. I sat in on the call today with Senator Bennett and Hickenlooper around the discussion around the American Rescue Plan. This was put on by the CML as well. Again, very interesting discussion with listening to our senators talk about meeting the needs and having the flexibility to recognize different priorities in different communities. And so that was an interesting conversation. And I also sat on the CML Policy Committee call on the update for the transportation funding legislation that is going through. And that was a really interesting call about the efforts to modernize our transportation system. And this legislation is looking at $4 billion in revenue over 10 years by implementing 9 new fees, including an increase in the gas tax, which has not been increased since 1991, electrical vehicle fee, and several others. But it will be a real opportunity to improve our roads and highways and address multimodal. And they're working very hard on making this equitable distribution throughout the state. And lots of people spoke to that from other communities. So I was really happy to hear that. And that's all for tonight for me. Thank you.
Thank you and congratulations, Melissa. So, Councilor Bettine.
Well, I'm going to take a bit of a pass. My board commitments are future, and I can update you in the next meeting. But I do want to congratulate our colleague Melissa on her preliminary victory, and congratulations. You'll be the former and now future mayor. And I'm really grateful to hear that news, and I wish you the best with it. It would have been awkward if I had run because maybe someone would have lost and someone would have won on the at the same time. That would have been weird. But I'm glad that you're moving on with the charge, and you're greatly suited for it. So
thank you. And I look forward to our next city council meeting and being able to talk further once my head calms down and talking to all of you and thanking especially Mayor Brookie and Councilor Bettine before their last meeting. So we'll talk more.
Thanks. Councilor Noseworthy.
Thank you. Also, my congratulations to right now the unofficial results and the unofficial winners. As I look forward to having you all in one case reinstated, but other cases taking that oath of office, which swears to uphold the Constitution, among other items. 3 things. One, I attended 2 weeks ago the CRC, the Community Relations Commission meeting, and I did send Council and Hosea a summary of that meeting. Much of the discussion centered around a PBS news story in 9R, and I understand there's been an update to that news story. There's been statements from the principal of the school, more clarification. So, but what I did want to say is Jose and I are reaching out to meet with the vice chair and chair of the CRC tomorrow, in part because that's a very different advisory board, and the resolution is created in a different manner. And I think it just functions in a very different way from something like the Parks and Rec or the Infrastructure Advisory Board or even the multimodal. And so we'll be meeting with that, kind of setting up, I think, talking about feedback we've received, the resolution, some guidelines, recommendations, and then thinking about from a staff perspective, and council still needs to do this, from a staff perspective, what are some things that would be realistic to work on and accomplish in the coming year? So that leads me into actions. So for next week, I'd like to suggest there's 3 big things that as this council, I think we still might need to discuss. I would very much think that we may need to do an update on our meeting with the CRC and just inform this council, or if not this one, then the incoming council of kind of that discussion, because I don't like to have those discussions without informing all of councilor. We've been talking about a whistleblower policy for at least, it'll be 2 years in the end of April. And the city attorney has given us a draft, and we have given him no feedback in a formal way on that draft. And so in an effort to clean up business, I would like to recommend that maybe we think about doing that. And then the last item is the Julie Brown sentencing is coming up May 14th. You'll recall back in January, we prepared a letter. It was signed by 4 counselors on our views of the sentencing. The judge was quite, and Dirk, please correct me, felt pretty strongly that restitution needed to be made, and there were opportunities to do that. To date, of the over 700,000, 250,000, I think, has been provided. And I think we as a council, because this happened on previous councils and on our watch, I would like us to take the responsibility of ultimately drafting, and maybe it's just updating and reworking the letter that we sent, looking at that and having that letter available to take, or a letter to take to the judge. And that's under the condition that nothing changes. If there's been no additional restitution made to the city, then as the representatives of the victim, I believe we have a responsibility to look at that. And I'd like to suggest that we take care of that next week as among our final actions as a council.
Thank you, Councilor Noseworthy. And yeah, we'll definitely, those are 3 really great issues, and we'll take a poll as to see if there's concurrence amongst councilors, remaining councilors, to deal with that with this council, as you suggest, or if that does get brought up in the new body, so to speak. And so we will be preparing that.
And I'd just like to say, in my own view, I don't think it's fair to put this on the new counselors in their first week when we've been dealing with it for over a year. So I think that we're the council that has the responsibility to address this.
Yeah, I would say we haven't been dealing with CRC issues of that nature for a year, but the Julie Brown situation, as well as the whistleblower, I think is definitely worthy of consideration by this council. And so we'll make that consideration. So thank you for that suggestion.
I would agree with that, Dean. I think you're right. And I didn't get a chance because I got kind of rushed, but congratulations, Melissa, and congratulations to the other 2 that will be joining us also.
With that, I don't know if Ben has another update or a final election results, or if we just leave it with the numbers that we received previously.
Mayor, if I could, I think Barbara had items. I just want to make sure that I saw 3 that were in support.
I think we need to.
I just want to make sure I caught it right. I didn't want to assume anything. I know that there was items out there. I'd like to make sure if I have consensus to place that on the agenda for next week.
I would prioritize the letter regarding Julie Brown, personally. That would be my.
That's the one I think. I don't think there's action that we're going to take. Final action on the whistleblower thing. I think the Julie Brown issue is the item most relevant and urgent item. for consideration. The CRC is, I think you'll have fruitful discussions with them tomorrow. And I think it is incumbent upon a new council to really define the future and the purpose of the CRC. And I don't think discussion about that in 2 weeks is going to be, in my opinion, fruitful.
And I would probably, thank you, Mayor. I would just want to make my priority, since I threw out 3, my priority would be the Julie Brown letter to the judge, that recognizing that things could change, and that would then be, up to a new situation, but finishing that. And then if time allows, because some of these can be long, I would very much like to have the whistleblower review, have us do our job of giving some feedback into that, because it has been outstanding for, I think, about a year and then some. So I'd like to get back to Dirk on that.
I would concur with that. Any other opinions? I think you've heard Councilor Baxter's priorities, Councilor Noseworthy's priorities, and I would concur with those. So that sounds like 3, Jose. Not to include the CRC at this point. With that, it's been a big night, and thank you all for participating most congenially. And with that, we look forward to study session next week, of course, and then the changing of the guard, or passing the gavel, if you will, in 2 weeks. And I look forward to that. Really look forward to that, actually, in some respects. Look, and I understand, we haven't had a discussion whether that's virtual, or I assume that will be a virtual meeting as well. But there's no indication that we are anything but virtual at this point. So we look forward to seeing you back on screen in a couple of weeks for the changing of the guard. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting.